So, once again, we are facing news of typical Tory short-sightedness. We have, for the past 4 years, highlighted problem, asked what the government is going to do about it. The government either just hasn't responded, flat out ignored it, or just said it'll be fine. This, of course, has then turned into an absolute crisis. And we've just seen this literal system play out again and again and again this year, of just rinse and repeat again and again and again. Just hasn't stopped. And we are in next year for it's going to be bad, and I am not looking forward to it, to be honest. But this is where we are, unfortunately. So please do, if you like the channel, help the channel grow and support me. Please do hit those likes and share buttons, which is absolutely fantastic. And if you would like to do so, please look down below and visit my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link. And thank you very much to the people that do support me that way. Your support is very, very much appreciated. So, on with yet more problems to come, and the government to deny them. So this comes from The Guardian, and this is the UK facing risk of systemic economic crisis, official paper says. So the government has privately admitted that the UK faces an increased likelihood of systemic economic crisis as it completes its exit from the European Union in the middle of a second wave of the coronavirus pandemic. The confidential Cabinet Office briefing, seen by The Guardian, also warns of notable risk that in the coming months the country could face a perfect storm of simultaneous disasters, including the prospect of a bad flu season on top of the medical strains caused by COVID-19. Winter of 2020 could see a combination of severe flooding, pandemic influenza, and the novel emerging infections disease, and coordinated industrial action against a backdrop of the end of the Brexit transition period, it warns. We've only been warning about this for the past year, since the coronavirus has come in, and we've been saying, hey, maybe we should get an extension. Just a thought, maybe? Nope. Oh. The briefing, marked official and sensitive, and delayed and dated of last September, lays out government planners and the possible impacts of the last stage of Brexit, detailing the reasonable worst-case scenarios across 20 different areas of national life, from oil, healthcare to travel and policing. It also summarises Whitehall's view on the current state of the nation to provide context for those warnings, depicting a country struggling to overcome difficulties posed by one crisis, yet bracing for a second, as all departments are told to prepare for a no-deal departure. So we can pretty much imply from this that even though it is really, really critical and important that we get a deal, even if we got a skinny deal, it would be something. We are seeing government departments essentially being briefed that it's going to be a no deal, which is massively disappointing because, once again, Boris Johnson said that he would get a deal. He'd also said, if you go all the way back to the referendum, that Britain could remain in the single market and customs union. But there you go. So anyway, it continues. Global and British food supply chains will be disrupted by circumstances occurring concurrently at the end of the year, the paper warns. Stockpiles built up at the end of 2019 were diminishing during the pandemic and cannot easily be replenished. There there will not be overall food shortages, but problems could reduce the availability of some fresh supplies and push prices up, and low-income groups will be most at risk of food insecurity if there is a no-deal Brexit, including single parents, children in large families, and those with disabilities. The economic chaos could also risk the rise of a breakdown in public order and a national mental health crisis, while reducing the financial levels available for the government to respond to other risks. This was a description of planning assumptions, and it warns of this. So, the fact that we are going to do this, and that you have the government internally is going, we are warning that these are potential problems. You know, we've said this from the very start of things. Imagine for a second, someone came along to you and you were in a job that you'd been in for, I don't know, some time, some very substantial time, and they go, I've got this amazing job for you, but I can't tell you what it is, but you might have this pay, you might have these hours, you might get these benefits, come join me. So you leave your job, only for them to turn around and say, all that stuff I promised you is not going to happen. That is the situation we are in. And I have always said this, that we need to make sure that the Brexit supporters, not the Brexiteers, because I always say there needs to be a distinction between these two groups of people, and that the Brexit supporters need to know it's not people like me you need to be angry at. It's the Brexiteers who promised all this, who got you into this mess, who promised the earth but couldn't even deliver on a single crumb. And we were warning you of this from the very beginning. So you need to know who you need to be angry at. So this is going to be, it's really not going to be good. And this isn't the first time, for those of you who have been aware of this, this isn't the first time that we've had this. You will know that this isn't the first type of report we've had this. But now to have multiple reports of this, what on earth is our government thinking doing this? It's unbelievable, but this is where we are. Anyway, it continues. There may also be an increase in community tensions and public disorder. Police tracked increases in Brexit-related hate crime in March of 2019, and at the end of that year, 2 other periods of intense political and public focuses on leaving the EU and briefing notes. Doesn't surprise me, but this is what Brexit has done to this country. And as much as the Brexit supporters would like to not deny their part in just how much the country is going to go down the toilet, they have to take some responsibility in this and say that, you know, we have to go back to the European Union. This was not what we were promised, and you will have to pay a price. And probably that price will be us joining the euro. And to be honest, good, because it doesn't make any real difference as long as we're back in the EU. And quite frankly, the quicker we do it, the better. So, the Cabinet Office said it did not take comment on comments of leaked documents, but said it was part of the intense planning to support individuals and citizens at the end of the transition period. As a responsible government, we continue to make extensive predictions of wide-ranging scenarios, including the reasonable worst-case scenario. This is not a forecast or a prediction of what will happen, but rather a stretching scenario. It reflects a responsible government ensuring we are ready for all eventualities, a spokesperson said. a responsible government? After this year, could you call our government a responsible government? I don't think so. So the threats of disruption to essential services and analysis, confident in their analysis, are ranked by a traffic light system: red, amber and green. Areas marked as high or moderate concern including public disorder, law enforcement and impact on low economic groups, adult social care, food and water supplies. The provisions incorporate some of the details relevant when Operation Yellowhammer, which is the one we went over last time, remember, were the contingency plans for a no-deal exit leaked last year. But this new scenario goes even further. So if these are the worst case scenarios and Operation Yellowhammer highlighted, why are our government now preparing for even worse case scenarios? Evidently, there's something they don't want to tell us. And of course, the prediction of that Brexit dies on the 1st of January is going to be, I think, well and truly on course to come true. So many of the problems identified that have been magnified by an impact of the costly and devastating pandemic, and the briefing includes warnings of high degree of change, regardless of whether Britain can agree to a trade deal with Europe. Some of the starkest descriptions are reserved for the health and social care sectors. The pandemic has and will continue to limit the capacity of the health and social care sector to prepare for and respond to the end of the transition period. It warns that noting exceptions of a sudden level of system disruptions from November until at least April. Adult social care provisions in particular is concerned with the civil service admitting that it was actually acutely aware of the risk posed by the potential labour shortages caused by Brexit because of the reliance on EU citizens and a workforce already stretched by pandemic controls. You should have known, we've covered this multiple times, just how much we have relied on for years of having people from the EU come over and fill in for our labour force. That is gone from next year. And that will be a huge, huge problem. So how does our government intend to fix it? We don't know. So the government had not expected Brexit to cause major change in this area, but an increase in inflation that pushes up the supply costs may lead to provider failure. And a drop in imports of medicines is also flagged as a serious potential problem, with a reasonable worst case flow rate of 60 to 80% of current levels, putting patient safety at risk. However, in October, the government announced the ferry freight contracts worth nearly 80 million to ensure that medicines and other vital supplies continue to reach the UK. So the scenarios assume a significant winter resurgence of COVID and the cases included through October and November, exactly the trajectory the country was on before the second national lockdown. Though there is evidence the infections are now falling, controls to combat this new rise in cases may severely damage the economic recovery, and the recovery is negligible. Consumer and investor confidence remains low in the long term, and international trade is severely disrupted. The disruption of the fallout ranges from a surge of infections it also warns of. The government may also struggle to get help from the private sector, as the pandemic has left many of the UK businesses with diminished capacity to deal with any financial shock caused by Brexit. Companies are more fragile across many sectors, and this will have an impact on business readiness and the vitality towards the end of the transition period. The document says that the likelihood of the commercial failures, including that of major government contractors, has increased, while smaller companies may be harder to reach and slower to act. Local council finances are also particularly shaky, which we've already seen from Croydon going bankrupt. The level of sustained activity over 2020 and the local level has resulted in a lack of institutional capacity to absorb and implement the required changes for the end of the transition period, the document warns. 5% risks are at the risk of financial failure in the wake of COVID-19, even after government support. So 5% of our local councils are at risk because of COVID-19. And a no-deal Brexit could mean even higher demand on their services. The most vulnerable could need support from the military or extra aid from central government, especially if local responders find resources diverted to current emergencies. Other concerns include shortages of chemicals needed to treat water supply and veterinary medicines essential to the food chain, and these are now depleted, and British manufacturing capacity has been reduced because of COVID. Other fresh problems flagged up in the report include potential a 10 to 20% increase in travel insurance premiums for holidaymakers heading to the continent. Now the European health insurance card is no longer valid, and people with pre-existing conditions may struggle to get coverage. COVID may also have complicated people's plans to move either to or from the UK, leading to people losing access to social security cover without any agreement to cover them. If in the UK, vulnerable people will have not completely completed their paperwork and will struggle to have access to help during the pandemic, they could also be cut off from their support. So it's not good at all. Prognosis, this just doesn't look good at all. We've been saying this from the beginning of the pandemic. Why do we not just get an extra extension and just extend it by a year? I'm pretty sure that the EU, if we went to them and said, look, we are not prepared for Brexit, let's be honest. That's if the government can be honest, let's stay that. So if the government can actually be honest with the EU and say we are not prepared for it, and the stress that we're under because of COVID, we need at least an extra year. Why has our government, again, a quote, to quote themselves, a responsible government, and I use that word responsible in the most loosest terms possible, because I do not think this government can be responsible in any way, shape or form, because they are just proven that they can't. It's going to be an absolute disaster. It's going to be a complete mess. And it is the fault entirely of the Brexiteers, because they are the ones in charge. They've got no one to blame themselves. They can't even blame the EU. And here we are. So, as always, please do like and share this video. And as always, down below there are links to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link. And thank you very much to the people that do support me. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you all next time.